Get going with our final panel discussion, after which we will get into our award ceremony, which we're very excited about. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our participants in the event activation panel. You see their names on the screen. Our moderator, the founder of Venue Edge, David Saferstein. The CEO of Bespoke Sports and Entertainment, Mike Boykin. The head of advertising partnerships for Sport Radar, Steve Monty. And if he hasn't told you already, he's from Canada, he will. And finally, the co-GM and vice president of accounts for TGI Sport, Paul Sturbins.
All right, is that on? Okay, cool. So we'll get right into it. I know we're running a little late. We had a great panel earlier, really talking about from the title sponsor angle that Rob moderated, did a great job on. Tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. But really thinking of it from a title sponsor standpoint. Now what we want to do is look at it from a practical standpoint. All right, how do we activate those ideas? How do we then generate the engagement, create the connection to the fan? Because if there's no connection to the fan, it doesn't matter. There's no real engagement. The activation's not successful. So we put a good panel together that hits different aspects of that. Let's start with a little bit about what your group brings to the table and kind of where you are in that activation process. Let's start. Go ahead.
Me? Our agency provides consulting and creative services as step one, and then generally, if a client chooses to get engaged with a sport, we then develop plans, an activation plan to go to market. How are we going to use this investment that we just made in a sports property? So those are the two big pillars, and then we have client experiences group that customizes events, and sometimes it's at a bowl game or a golf event, but it kind of depends on the KPIs. You'll hear us talk about most everything we do for brands, and it affects fans, is their key performance indicators. What are they truly trying to do? And if we understand that, then we're smarter with our investment, and we're very fortunate in working with Danny Morrison and the CSF team. They are so client friendly. They want to be sure you've got the right asset mix, and we're able to call audibles. If something's not working and something's working really well, we're able to shift the dollars and assets that aren't working quickly, again, so we go back against the goals and objectives that the clients set forward.
Okay, great. Steve?
Yeah, Sport Radar, probably two main prongs that I can explain here because it's quite the beast to unpack Sport Radar. But we acquire the official data rights from major rights holders across the world. There's about 1,300 now in our roster that we're proudly partnered with. And when I say acquiring the data rights, I mean the actual on-field, on-ice, on-court data itself. So player movements, tracking, the actual scores, every statistic you could imagine. If you ask Google what the score is of a game, chances are it's a Sport Radar feed, Alexa too. Several broadcast companies, Fox, ESPN, and CBS and many others also enjoy it. So that's on our data collection side. And then Sport Radar about 8 years ago now has launched a division called ADS, ADS, and it's actually advertising sponsorship. And so it's really to help activate on those sponsorships, bolstering an awful lot of that sport data that we've got, whether it's injecting dynamic messages into those creatives about player milestones, live scores into the creative itself, all the way to knowing moments in time during the game itself. So if a milestone is reached in the game, our marketing technologies have the ability to light up messaging in real time as those moments are hit during the game too. So some pretty neat stuff that we'll talk about.
Right, that's cool. Paul?
Yeah, thanks, David. Pleasure to be here and meet a lot of you these past couple of days. It's been really great. Really, TGI, to simplify it, we sit in the space of creating and delivering commercial assets and inventory that are broadcast facing. So really very niche to this overall brand activation and event activation, but really super important, as you can imagine, and highly valuable to everyone's needs to keep that revenue generating and brand activating.
Mike, you mentioned KPIs. So let's actually start the discussion kind of at the end. You know, and this for all of you, when you are working with a client, or whether it's on the bowl side or the sponsor side, what's success? I mean, is it just hitting the KPIs, or are there other nuances of that activation that you look for?
That's the most important one. I had lunch today with a friend and client, and we talked about sales. And I think at the end of the day, they engage in marketing and activities like sponsorship, not only to get top of the funnel consideration, but we want to make that engagement so compelling that it may change behavior. And I think back, it was either the first or second Duke's Bowl, where Darren Ravel, the business writer, had a question: how many of you have heard of Duke's mayonnaise, and would you consider buying it? And I think the number was 66 or 67% had never heard of it, but after the bowl game said, yeah, I'm going to buy it. And that's simplistic, but it's also, at the end of that, you want all of these things and how you build that relationship with the consumer to lead to that, and then loyalty, and then evangelism, that they will not only consume it, but they'll tell others, you have to buy Duke's mayonnaise.
Gotcha. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I think on the media side of things, it is sometimes a little more black and white down to the KPI, you know, whatever the objective is of the campaign. Selfishly, a renewal is obviously a good sign too, if they're going to continue the business, continue down that front. You know, and I think that it's important to be able to measure that connection between the brand messaging and the fans' passion. That's ultimately what those sponsors are there to tap into. It's the insanity that drives with our sports from the fans. And so being able to measure that connection of brand message and how it was delivered is very important to them.
Yeah, for us, I think it's just simply providing solutions that help everyone generate more revenue. And I think that's maybe if we're being honest, that's the biggest thing to try to keep everything going.
Right. I mean,
Dave, one thing I would consider, I asked this group, as I tried to think about it, and I've been fortunate enough to work on bowl committees and go to them my whole life. If I was sitting in your seats today, what would I maybe hope to glisten that I maybe have not thought of? And I would be that the engagement and activation is not just in venue. For Dukes, it's at retail. It's the content. It's the Miller Yoho and that team. I mean, they hit it out of the park for Dukes. The category and the brand explodes with their creativity. And so it's in market, it's near market, it's digital, it's in broadcast. It's just in so many ways. And the more ways you can help a client drive the ball forward, the better the chance you are for renewal. And I think a lot of people, you're either renewing or you're trying to sell. And if you're aware of those points going in, I think you can build a better proposal that'll allow you to keep them, extend them, or grow them.
right. And then, I mean, then there are those successes that you can't really plan for. You know, we've heard a lot about Pop-Tarts and Cheez-It, obviously, and certainly in the last panel. You know, what went on with especially Pop-Tarts this year, there were no KPIs. You know, none of that was planned. I mean, it was planned, but
No, these are
the way
organic,
things
natural
took
moments.
off, right? You know, and just looking for those opportunities and being open to trying those things and
Well, fun.
and then leveraging them.
She said it today. I think I'd never heard so many panelists use the word fun, and I'm going, amen, amen. This is fun. You go to bowl games, you want to have fun. You want to cheer for your team, maybe see something that you can't see in a rivalry game.
Yeah.
You know, and they do it on broadcast, they do it in venue. The teams get to experience fun, and we were very fortunate from the very beginning. Dukes challenged our team to punch above their weight and to have fun. And as a marketer and agency person, man, that's the golden ticket. And then to have partners again, CSF, ESPN, I mean, they were fantastic on all levels. Everybody we worked with at different levels, they got it, and it just kind of kept feeding the beast. And I think other brands are doing a great job. That was awesome what they did.
Right. So, Steve, let's shift gears a little bit. Talking timeline, and you know, it's bowl season. And I know we were talking, I think last night, some of the games have 10 days, once the teams are announced to really step in and do their thing. How does that affect your data collection and what you offer?
It's an extremely short turnaround time, and so we've just helped with technology to make it a little seamless to both deploy and to install on site as needed. So we've really reduced sort of the operational, I guess, lift of getting integrated. Creative assets aside, those are the ones that have to wait till the absolute last minute, and once teams are announced at least. Creative assets aside, everything what we'll do is preload as much as we possibly can so that it's all ready to go live. Our marketing services span, we own and operate a demand side platform, which puts all the banner display ads on the website, YouTube pre-rolls, and it has digital out-of-home capabilities as well. So we will pre-buy in markets, for instance, some of the digital signage that we can in and around the areas, to try to build the momentum up to announcement, and then once we've got a team announcement, it drives into a lower funnel activity like ticket sales, or,
Sure.
depending on the.
So, Paul, Mike had mentioned, it's about the venue, but then obviously there's more eyeballs on it from a broadcast standpoint. Talk about your technology a little bit and how it aids in the in-venue, but also enhances the connection outside to the broadcast.
Yeah, great point. I mean, that's, again, where we specialize in. If you're averaging 3 to 4 million, views and spectators, plus whatever is curated or captured for highlights and socials, you're talking about the actual game itself and how it's captured, and what does that canvas look like for y'all, around the field of play? Because of course, if you're talking about on-field logos, that's title partnership, right? And that's about it. So what's the next layer? And that's field adjacent, and we're talking about red zones or back of end zones and things like that. Things that I think football only now is really grasping, to be honest, because other sports by nature, soccer, rugby, cricket, they needed this. They don't have the timeouts that you have, so they needed to create commercial value. So now how does it translate to American football, college football, bowls, and the dynamic nature of what LED and what that replaces? No offense to the A-frame static sign that you have, but it's very difficult for a brand to convey their message in an 8 to 10 foot space and it be meaningful. I've heard that word used here a lot, and I like it. And so I think LED in general in this form creates a bigger message. I think Simon said it this morning, bigger is better. It's closer to the field proximity-wise, obviously respecting safety, player safety. And just being captured in those moments for people to watch highlights and watch it in real time, to be like, okay, my brand can be associated with this captured moment. And maybe what's not, because I know lots being talked about the title partnerships, but you probably have sponsors 2 through 10 that you also need to provide inventory for. And this is a dynamic medium that now you have minutes to assign potentially, or segments of the game, or positions that you can say, I need to assign it to these folks because they need some power too. They need some monetization as well. So I think this is a great asset for just that.
I think a nice complement to that is also thinking about your audiences in a digital realm, and thinking of it as near limitless, scale and opportunity to be able to complement where you need a partner with a greater share of voice. Your physical assets are maybe constrained by those, select partners. You can always turn to a digital, world to consider near limitless scale at fan acquisition and fan targeting for your brand partners. Yeah.
How does talking about what Paul just said and how you followed up, how does what you do, like where are some options and things you would recommend to tie into that from a digital space?
There's quite a few. I mean, data collection in today's privacy world, compliance and privacy are always top of mind, and so we've got quite a few solutions. From whenever I don't have a technical word for something, I use the word widget, so I call it a widget. But it's a dialogue window that allows you to interact with the fan, asking questions like, who's your favorite team, who's your favorite player, favorite stadium. The sky's the limit, you're in complete control of it. And then a user would exchange their email address in order to see the global poll results. Like gamification, things like this we would deploy, and that'll do email collection. At time of game, during your ticket sales periods, if your ticket partners are sharing back, transaction data, any email addresses that we can collect, we can put a digital identifier against to remarket to them later. And then lastly, I would say one of the newer technologies, a little evasive, but privacy safe, believe it or not, is folks at the game, should they happen to distract themselves on a second screen, open up a website or an app, we're able to capture mobile device IDs of fans that are actually there in the stadium, which produces sort of a twofold then follow-up approach. One, remarket to those fans that you know were in the stadium. And secondly, while in stadium, I mentioned we're aware of every moment in the sport from the data APIs that we sit on. And so your brands can light up messaging during game, during those moments on second screens. But having been to a bowl, there's not much distracting yourself on a cell phone. There's not much time for it.
Well, there could be, and I'm kind of surprised we haven't talked about it, or I haven't had any meaningful side conversations, is the impact on gambling in the sports venue. Just came online in North Carolina, and I can tell you the 21 to 34-year-olds in our office all were signing up, and that's part of their experience when they go to soccer games, football games, and I'm anxious to see what will happen in the college space. You know, I know there's been some discussion about restricting player proposition bets, but if you look down the road, that's what they're accustomed to. So there will be some resolution, I believe, somewhere down the road.
What do you see from an activation standpoint? So if you bring on gambling or one of the companies, you know, where do you see that going from an
Could
sponsor
partner.
activation?
You could partner. It could be more than a media outlet. Duke's talked about that this morning. You know, there could be cash and jars of Duke mayonnaise. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure it'd be well thought out and researched as what will be the triggers for more engagement for all involved. That would be something I'm kind of watching to see what happens.
I'm going to step away, leave you two over there on technology for a second.
Thank you.
And then because what was interesting, again, nothing against technology because I'd push it, but when we talked about, talking about the title sponsors today, if you looked at every one of those, there was not a high technology, other than the toaster, the technology of a giant toaster. There really wasn't a lot of technology talked about today in that session. So, Mike, talk a little bit about, the simplification of it, because it's not, because we talk a lot, and I know y'all just came out of sessions that were, and I don't remember the right wording, but small budget, big budget, I think was probably what those signs said. But some of the things we talk about for activations, budgets doesn't matter because it's more about the idea, the creative, the connection with the fan instead of getting caught up in the technology piece of it, which we'll come back to in a second. Instead of getting caught up in that, it's more about the creative and that engagement and that activation that is fun, like we were saying earlier.
Yeah, and again, it goes from retail. We talked about the Duke's Bowl, but the Duke's Classic kind of kicks off the season, usually first or second week of September. And a couple of years ago, we had an HBCU game, Aggies, Eagles, Central, and A&T. And it was a big year. It was like the 100th year. And I thought that CSF did a great job working with Dukes, and they came up with what we call spirit jars that celebrated 100 years. So that was fan engagement to HBCU fans who had not seen that before in a meaningful year, in a meaningful way, and those became collector jars. We've since done that for other classics, South Carolina, North Carolina, or bowl games. That's one way. Then you get into the social, and I think CSF does just an amazing job. And there are other agencies and the folks at Duke's corporate, they're all feeding and pushing each other ideas, and they kind of feed on each other. But that's a whole different realm of engagement for fans, and they come to expect certain things. I think Rebecca mentioned that today. After the first year when we did the white Gatorade and it wasn't Duke's mayonnaise, we were getting roughed up. And, but fans that go to the game now, they rush to the corner of that end zone where the tarps are and the TV channels are, or TV cameras, and, they're fired up. And they're winning fans. I thought West Virginia was going to burn couches. I mean, they were fired up. And, so it's it's retail, it's social, it's in venue, it's watching experience. I mean, I think somebody mentioned Harry Styles, was the on-field, and he's on ESPN. And I can remember being on the field with him and a couple of folks, maybe Joe Tusa from Dukes, and Harry asked a young lady on our team, like, can you get me some French fries for the mayo dump? And that means we didn't have that idea. That was his idea. That was organic. He wanted to go over there and dip it on Coach Brown. And, you know, so those kinds of things, we're engaging, we're looking across everything, every place we can touch them and make that experience more fun, more meaningful, more memorable. Then that's what this incredible number of assets, both internal at Dukes, external agencies, CSF, there's just a lot of people and they're working together against that. And I think we click a lot of boxes from a fan perspective that the fan has chosen to get engaged.
While sitting over here trying not to take offense, I had a thought that there was certainly no replacement for that in-person, that fun component. That's a real experience. You know, these are core memories. I would like to think of digital as sort of the tool and the technology that can just continue that experience and certainly make it a measurable, you know, quantitatively measurable, you know, experience then for the brand too. But I wouldn't want to see the in-person fun stop, you know, when digital and technology has to come into it. I think that same playfulness in the messaging is absolutely welcomed, and continuing those organic moments like that into the digital sphere, because maybe only, well, we saw it this morning, a few million people saw it, you know, while the game was on. What about the other millions of folks that didn't get a chance to see that experience? So bringing it back to life.
Mike, you were talking about renewals earlier. It's also about, in a way, renewing the fans. So, all right, that's what you did this year. I got to come back and see, how are you going to up that next year?
Right. I don't know how many of the bowls do fan surveys. I would assume a lot. And again, we see it in Charlotte with the Dukes Bowl. They tell you what they like, and if they don't like something, you really better listen. I think they like almost everything that we do. And now I think we've gotten to the stage where it's what are you going to do to surprise me? There's certain things that are table stakes, but I know these rascals are going to do something, and I better be watching, and the benefactor will be the Dukes brand.
For sure. One thing when, you know, we're working with partners, we try to look at, and if we're doing our job, there's a revenue increase, and technically the bowl or the partner isn't. They're making money that's paying us, so we're not, you know, hitting that revenue, because that's the first question, especially for we're back to technology. For you guys is, well, that's an expense. When somebody says that, what's the answer?
You want to take that?
Go ahead. Sure can, yeah. It's certainly an expense. It's an investment more than an expense, you know. And so then the technology's job is to go and seek out that return on that investment. Does it always work? No, I'd be lying if I sat up here saying it works 100% of the time. But it works to work as effectively as it possibly can. And that's, you know, optimizing which placements you're on, what sort of channels you're running the media through, and understanding what a more intelligent investment looks like, given a whole factor of things: the budget itself, the turnaround time, which creative assets are available, and where, with that budget, with those assets, where and how can you make the biggest impact. I think if you do enough sort of media planning and briefing with the client and the partners, you get to a pretty good understanding to at least start off on the right foot, and then continually optimize and measure yourself to ensure that you're course correcting as needed. But there are no guarantees that come with it, but certainly making you know, best efforts with the tools.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, I think it's a commitment to an expense that generates you more revenue eventually, if not immediately. And not just on the economic side, but does it make your life easier? Does it add quality to your perception of what you're bringing to the table and how you're perceived out there? I think there's a lot of intangibles to all of this and all the little things, and they all kind of comprehensively collect to make who you are and what you are, and build upon it year upon year, right? To that thing. You want to be a step better than you were the last year, regardless of the teams that are playing in your competition. Right.
Let me ask you something that, you know, you don't see a lot of field boards, field LEDs in football. You see them in soccer, obviously. I know they were in Orlando last year in the end zones and successful. What's been the reaction? You know, because now it's football and you're just not used to seeing that.
Yeah, I think it's a cultural shift. It's a little bit. I mean, the great. It's odd, right? So we do all the games in NFL International in the UK and Germany, and I think that maybe seeing that here and them doing it over there has kind of opened up some eyes and going, wait a second, they're doing that there. And NFL is probably never going to do that here just because of how strong their broadcast is, and they don't need to. But I think it's an opportunity here in football, and I think I think the results and the data, and I don't have that in front of me, but I'm pretty sure those partners and those brands that have activated have been really happy with the results there. So,
Have you seen pushback?
no, I mean, one of the biggest things we've talked about here is player safety, right? How close can you get to make sure that, you know, players are in a safe mode? I think, you know, on the flip side, people are saying, hey, it cleans up, because we all know there's a lot of chaos around a football field. Maybe in the red zone, in the end zone, you get photography, like in soccer, right? Everybody's behind the LED systems. And it's clean. And so as a fan, you're watching a clean thing with obviously some commercial in it, and that's just accepted. But everybody else is behind that barrier, and it acts as a good barrier to stop fans from running the field, from keeping the camera people. And so I don't know. I do think, I believe in it, obviously. That's why we're here, and I think we can help a lot of folks with it. So.
Does anyone have any questions for any of the panel? We can stop. We can keep going.
Please,
Please.
hard ones. Right here.
All right.
Let's go.
We'll keep going. Let's talk future trends. Mike, what are you looking at? What are you excited about? What do you see coming down the pike as far as activations and certainly in your area?
Well, what I mentioned earlier, the impact on in-venue sports gambling by the young demographic. I just think we continue to make that experience in-venue. It's got to be great, or they will sit in front of a 75-inch TV and watch it and drink their cheaper beer. So I think you've just got to always be fantastic. I think we all have recognized here in El Paso the warmness of everybody I've met, hospitality industry, restaurants, hotels, that matters. I was fortunate to be in Augusta Sunday, and dang if they don't hit that out of the park. So things that you may take for granted, you know, the people who park their cars, or ushers, or security, or food and beverage, you can't miss that. You just can't. That has to be good. And then, you know, great competition attracts people. They want to go to live events. It's different. It's more fun. It's not cheap, and so you better deliver.
Right, because that fan experience isn't just inside the venue. It's driveway to driveway. It's
Right.
What was it like getting tickets? What was it like getting to there through security?
Right.
Concessions, the whole process.
And I didn't think it could get better in some situations, and I'm surprised that it does. And so that just means some people are putting a lot of time, resources, and training and planning, and then they're monitoring. They're not say, hey, check the box, we did it. No, they're doing the surveys. They're walking the grounds. They're paying attention to all these things that impact whether somebody wants to go to a bowl game in Tampa or Memphis or, you know, San Diego or Arizona. I mean, you know, it's not hard. It's competition, because they can do other things unless they're diehard. If they're super avid, you're going to get those. But I think most of these bowls need the community, the local community,
For sure.
to come, not just the two teams.
Right. Well, and that's in a year-long engagement. That's not just.
Right.
You can't start engaging with your community in December.
I'll tell you
which
one more
you're
trend that I've been thinking about in the last week or two is with the boom of women's sports and the Caitlin effect, and what I saw this year at the Ally Tip-Off Classic when Caitlin Clark came to Charlotte and they played Virginia Tech. And I saw little girls and little boys wearing that number 22. And I saw her make the lives of two little girls with fist bumps before the starting lineups. And I turned around in the section and every dad was crying. So as I sit here, I'm going, I don't know what the engagement is with females and bowl season, but we need to dial it up. There's got to be some things that can happen, auxiliary events, but I think we've seen that there's massive numbers of young ladies and young girls who can be drawn into sports. That would be something as a trend or something to keep an eye on, or could develop, that I'm
It's
anxious.
developing now, so
Yeah.
for sure. Steve, what about you as far as trends and what you see in the future?
Yeah, trends going future, I would say, is data, or data, depending if you're Canadian like me.
Are you from Canada?
I am, yeah. Interesting fact. Hey, I'd say data, and like by show of hands, has anybody heard of a data clean room? Oh, one. Oh, thank you. Oh, he's cheating. Yeah, you've heard of my data clean room. So this is sort of an advance in technology now that allows a rights holder, a team, and a brand to sort of coalesce and share their first-party data together inside of a data clean room. And by its name, it's a privacy-safe area whereby no participant gets to see the other's data, but you get to glean all the insights from this coupled data together. So perhaps a brand wants to look at simple things, an overlap or a complement of the two audiences, their customers and your fans. Maybe you want to get into specific demographic analysis. To your point, what is the female representation and engagement looking like? These are, quantitative measures that you could apply. But I think this sort of data sharing and understanding impact on lift on our actual CRM, our audience lists, is going to have a pretty bright future.
Cool. Paul, what are you looking at trend-wise?
Oh, I mean, I guess selfishly, we're into the virtual insertion, virtual replacement world in a lot of sports. So NBA on court graphics, Major League Baseball behind home plate, replacing somebody's LED event of different commercialization that goes to different regions, local versus local. So things like that. We always say that the best technology is the technology you don't realize is technology, that you actually, wait, is that on court? Is that real? Is that a sticker? So that's the goal, I think, for all of us, to not take away from the sport that we all like, but to still provide the value.
All right. I'm going to steal a question that Rob asks on other panels. Looking at other things you've seen, I always give the same answer. How many went to the Chihuahuas game last night? So, I always look at minor league baseball from a engagement and an activation standpoint, because nobody, there's some survey that's been done that 88% of the fans don't care if the team wins or loses. It's just about the activation, and they just have fun. That's all that minor league baseball. So I always look at them as a different source of inspiration or ideas. Something outside of your general worlds, what do you all look at and say, wow, if we could glean something from them into our world, that would be pretty cool?
I look to retail media networks, and I watch these same brand sponsors getting spoiled with sort of personalization and one-to-one messaging to consumers. I would love to be able to sort of bridge that gap an awful lot more, that personalization, that one-to-one.
Do you have an example? I'm putting you on the spot. A specific example
Of a retail media network? Yeah. Well, certainly the way they operate is predicated on exactly that. When a user lands on Amazon.com, they look at me, logged in, they know everything that I've purchased in the past, they know everything that everybody else has purchased.
They know everything you talked about purchasing.
Also scary, but possibly true. And so what they're doing is that on the other side of the table, they've got a whole bunch of brand partners, people selling on Amazon Marketplace, and they're just trying to make the most sensible match for those paid promotion spots. And to tell you the honest truth, as a user, the experience on it's getting better and better and better. Nothing upsets me. Is Expedia a sponsor at all here? I'm just going to pick on a few experiences. Otherwise, you book a flight on your favorite travel site. We'll just, there, much better. Your favorite travel site will then remarket to you, targeting, they're still telling me to come book a flight to El Paso and what a great time I'll have. Little do they know that I'm here having a great time. So these things are still a little broken that require, some fixing. And I think, again, going back to the first party data, that's sort of the key seed ingredient to getting it right.
Paul, you had kind of mentioned the NBA and MLB, but anything even in another technology that you could glean ideas from, or that these folks could look at as inspiration for what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think we got enough to chew on right now. No, I
I totally put you on the spot.
yeah, no, look, I love I love that the personal feeling and the capture and broadcast of all the stories and going the other way. And I think maybe by society we'll be doing more of that because we're getting so much on this automation technology side that we need to be further in touch with what we really care about. So that's counterintuitive to what you just asked, but yeah, I know.
My favorite travel site could be telling me about the awesome restaurants, about the Chihuahua game that I missed because I didn't know it was on. But all the experiences that you could bring to life, putting it relevant to any of the bowls would be, where are the parking venues? Where's the best deals on parking? Where do I get a good meal after? What's the go-to bar beforehand? You've got a lot of visitors, tourists that are coming in just for that purpose of that game, and it's a whole new area for us. So it's not just about getting me in the game, sell me some beer and a couple of hot dogs. It's there's a surrounding experience that I'm also there for. So maybe tapping on that a little.
What about you, Mike? Anything outside in a different world that you've seen that just is really impressive as far as an activation standpoint? Engagement.
Because I don't really look at it just from that, but I will steal from any event I go to. There's something brilliant everywhere, and I just have to look, and then, this universe of data points, of experiences. What are people responding to, and then how do we work with brands to change or morph? That never stops. But in terms of something that I haven't talked about now.
Cool. No, that's great. You guys brought a lot of different angles. Any questions before we wrap up for anyone on the panel? Nope. Nope. We're definitely nearing the end of the 2 days for sure. I can tell. All right. So, thank our panel. Before we head out, make sure you hang around. 3:15. Bestie Awards. Bowl season awards presented by Venue Edge. I'll just plug that in there for a second. But hey, we're talking about presenting sponsors. I may as well get that in there, right? So, all right. Thanks, everyone. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Change over the stage and we'll start our
Toronto
award
going to
ceremony.
stay 11 in the playoffs this year.